Good evening, everybody.
What's up?
Good evening.
Hey, look.
I know we just keep
We got
getting cooler,
new
more
merch.
merch.
Yeah,
and cooler.
I know.
And cooler.
I think we need to have a giveaway.
I think we probably will have a giveaway. I don't know that we'll do it this episode because we don't really have all of our mechanisms in place.
Right.
But I think we've got kind of a first round of merchandise coming out. By the way, welcome to Reverent and Rebellious.
Yes.
That's Logan. That's Pat. I'm Brother Peter. So in case this is your first time and maybe you wondered what you clicked on.
We're glad to have you.
Exactly.
Sorry, I'm excited.
Hey, while you're clicking around, click that like button and go ahead and click subscribe because you'll enjoy this.
You know you want to.
And comment below.
Yeah. And what we're really excited about is we've got some merchandise here, and we got the cup, and we got some tumblers, and we got some stuff like this is like the first round of handcrafted.
Yep.
Like this is not, we didn't
it's not mass produced.
No, we didn't get it online and all that stuff.
I feel like we can give a shout out to your wife.
Yeah.
Miss Karen. These are awesome.
Yeah.
She did
She's
a great
a champion,
job.
man.
Yeah. And so she is making a first round of handcrafted merchandise. And what we're going to do is, first off, we are going to do a giveaway. We're going to give away 2 of these fine-looking coffee mugs.
Yep.
And we're going to, get a contest going, or, I don't know.
Hey, and those are the big ones. They're not the little
Yeah.
candy,
no,
8
you can
ounce
fit like a whole cup of coffee in here.
Yeah. A real cup of coffee.
And what we're going to do, is we're going to release this first round of merchandise. We're going to sign it and number it.
Yep.
So when you get this first, like if you get like cup number 7,
It becomes
with
a collectible.
signatures on it. Then everybody else after that is going to get the stuff we're going to get online.
That's right.
And it's still going to be cool,
Yeah.
but not nearly as cool as
Right.
yours.
Yeah,
Not
you'll
the
have
it's not the first
special
edition.
man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're going to have shirts coming up here and hats coming up here and all kinds of fun stuff. So we're having a good time.
Yep.
We're having a good time. We are reverent, and we're going to be really fairly rebellious today.
I know.
Man.
I feel like Pat and I sometimes, I feel like we're pretty much, we're always ready to rebel.
Wide open.
We got Peter's a little sweating tonight.
Man,
Yeah.
I am sweating a little bit tonight. This, I will tell you just straight up, this is an episode that I did not want to do. Did not want to do because it is...
Especially with us.
Yeah, he's like, not with these 2 idiots.
These morons over here.
Yeah, we're going to rename this episode Rebellious and Heretical. No, this is the hot topic of the world today.
Yeah.
It just is.
That's why we had to do it.
I know. I knew this was coming, and I'm prepared. This is a subject that I have put literally years of study in. So we're going to do our very, very best to unpack the whole idea of human sexuality as it relates to Christianity and the church.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. We're going to kind of examine some different viewpoints. We're going to kind of track with the way the world has gone, track with the way the church has gone. And we're going to basically, we're not going to be shy about it. We're going to say where we land, and why we land there, and we're not the only ones that land there, and but we're not going to clobber anybody either.
Yeah, I will say this is not a witch hunt.
Not at all.
You know what I mean? This is not a trial. We're not putting anyone on trial or trying to throw anyone under the bus or anything.
Yeah,
and when all is said and done, we also have a challenge, a big time challenge.
Yep.
For the church. For our church and for all churches that are kind of in our same vein, and we're gonna save that to the end. But we are going to deal with the whole idea of human sexuality and all of its various expressions.
So to lighten the mood,
let's hear it.
Why don't you give us a joke?
Okay, let's see. I'm trying to think of which one I want to unleash here. Okay. I know. All I can think of right now is guitar player jokes.
I'm right here.
Yeah, I know. That's the thing. And I waylaid you with one last week.
Come on, I got thick skin. I'm not like most guitar
No,
players.
it's okay. It's okay. I think I will do. Oh, I know. I will do a. Since we're dealing with human sexuality, I'll do a girl singer joke.
Okay.
Okay. So this is for all my girl singers on the worship team. This is especially for you. How many girl singers does it take to change a light bulb?
I don't know.
Only one. She holds the light bulb and the world revolves around her.
Yeah. Very true. Very true.
Yeah. Sorry, ladies. I know you're going to be upset with me.
I'm
but
not.
that's
I
okay.
think it's great.
No,
Right,
it's all good.
I got one.
Okay, go ahead.
And it ties in with this.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's it's all right. It's all right. So there was this a farmer. Old farmer goes into a bar, and he sits down at the bar, and there's a woman that's sitting down next to him, and she turns to him and she says, "Are you a real farmer?" And he says, "Yeah. I plow my fields, I feed my cows, I fix barbed wire fences, I harvest corn." I plant my crops, I fertilize, I spray, I do all the things. I'm a real farmer. And he says, "What are you?" And she says, "Well, I'm a lesbian." And she said, "I get up in the morning, I think about women. When I'm at work, I think about women. When I eat dinner, I think about women. Everything I do, I think about women." And he's just like, "Okay, all right." So she leaves, and another guy comes in, he sits down next to the old farmer. And he says, "Hey, man, what are you doing?" He says, "I'm a farmer." And he says, "Are you a real farmer?" And he goes, "Well, I thought I was, but it turns out I'm a lesbian."
It's good. It's good.
Yeah, that fits. Yeah, that fits. Yeah. We've just eliminated a fourth of our audience right now. But hey, it's no big deal.
Yeah.
No big deal. No, I'm just teasing. No, this is a very, very important subject, and it's become a very important subject not only in our world but in the church today.
In the church world, yeah.
Yeah. So we've got on one side, seems like we've got this the hyper-conservative fundamentalist kind of viewpoint in the church that says anybody that does not fit our mold is going straight to hell. They're condemned. They need to repent of their sin immediately. Certainly not welcome in these parts. And then on the other side, you have what we call the progressive mindset in the church, which is, you know what? Everybody's good just the way they are. This is the way God designed everybody. And so there we go. What I want to do is I want to start by establishing what God's original design for human sexuality is.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we're going to kind of look at all the ways that it has kind of become broken over generations and generations and thousands of years.
And we are not condemning anyone from this podcast.
No.
Yeah, and I would say, too, that I would probably be more welcomed at the progressive church than I would be most conservative churches.
Maybe so.
Yeah, I mean, I walk in tattooed, long hairs, earrings and all that.
Maybe so.
I have experienced that.
Well, and that's actually one of the cool things. Like, I look around in our church, and I do think it's cool, like Pat up there with his tattoos. I'm like, because I know there's people that have been hesitant to come to church because they got a lot of tattoos.
Yeah, right.
They don't fit the very like high and tight, mold of what they think is.
That's the very reason why I don't cover them up.
And they come into our church and look at us and they say, "Well, if those guys can go to church,
we're good to go.
Anybody can go to
They
church."
let those fools up there. We good.
Okay, so I got a question for you guys. Is any one of us at this table not sexually broken in some way?
Not at all.
No.
We all are in some degree, some way, shape, or form.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Every human being is.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to talk about here. Now, what do I mean by sexually broken? Well, if you want to kind of get down to the ground level, what did God design sexual expression to be, to look like? You go back to the very, very beginning. Genesis 1, Genesis 2. We talked about this last week. God created them male and female. And then once again, we talked about how male and female were contained in one unit. God put Adam into a trance, and he separated the male and the female for the express purpose of them rejoining together and becoming one flesh, thereby making more babies.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's exactly right. So here's a good working definition of God's. I will say that what this comes down to is marriage. That God created sexuality to be in the context of marriage.
And we can agree with that across the board, across all denominations.
Yes. Yeah, completely. Now, the problem is when we sort of begin to redefine what marriage is.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get to a pretty, among pretty, I wouldn't say necessarily conservative, but orthodox. Let's say orthodox.
Yeah.
That's a good word. Historically orthodox view of marriage. Okay. Marriage is a lifelong, one flesh covenant union between two sexually different persons, a male and a female from different families. That's important around here. United with the purpose of telling God's story of faithfulness and creativity, and sexual relationships outside this covenant union are sin.
So you're telling me a family tree can't be a pole?
Your family tree must fork. That's exactly
at least
what,
once.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so how does that sound, Logan?
That's what I always have. I mean, that's what I was raised up knowing, or being taught.
Yes.
Yep.
So here's where we begin. Is and because we're going to talk about sexual brokenness. Okay, so we know immediately of sexual practices that are outside the bounds of that definition, right?
Sure.
So we would think of sex before marriage.
Sure.
Yep.
Fornication is what it's called in the Bible. We would talk about sex outside of a marriage, which would be adultery.
That's right.
We can talk about things like hypersexuality, where sexual addictions, things like that, which of course all of that comes into play with pornography use and the addictions that can cause and everything else like that. And of course, the big hot button issue is the whole same sex.
Yep.
Yeah.
Issue. So LGBTQIA plus.
And all of these are found outside of a biblical marriage.
Outside of this definition of what a marriage is.
So I want the listeners or viewers, if you're watching or listening, to keep this in mind, is we're not setting aside one group of these people.
No.
It's anything that's outside this framework found in Scripture.
That's right.
Yep. Two, if a dude and a chick, premarital sex,
Yep.
that is,
Same
there's
thing.
no hierarchy of
Yep.
sexual sin.
No. If it's outside of this definition, then sexual activity is not according to God's design.
That's right.
Yeah.
And if it's not according to God's design, just like taking another human life is not in God's design.
That's right.
So we're going to say that is not God's will. So it's if we do that, then we're going to be sinning.
Yeah.
Just like anything else we've been talking about. Okay, so but we're going to go in a particular direction because of the way not only has our culture and our society gone, but this has also been a trend in the church.
Sure.
It's the whole, now we have same-sex marriage. Mm-hmm. So is same-sex marriage a real thing?
Well, I mean, from a government standpoint, it is.
Yes, it is.
From a biblical standpoint, I don't think so.
Well, if you're going to go with this historically orthodox definition of what marriage is, then it can't be.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we've opened up the big can of worms.
Right.
So the idea is that everything in our society is sort of prompting us to say, to affirm, to say, no, same sex and all the different spectrums of that are perfectly okay, perfectly normal. Perfectly, and then now the certain parts of the church are saying that.
Yep. And I will also say, too, society has pushed us to be rather anti or pro.
Yeah. Well,
right.
Well, and I was going to ask, do you think that part of the reason we're in this such either pro or anti thing is because we've taken a back seat on this for so long?
Sure.
Like it's kind of one of them things where, we just, if we don't address the issue, we kind of hope it goes away, but it don't go away. And now it's gotten to a point where, you have to be for it or against it.
I think we've been scared to talk about it. And now it's to the point to where we overreact one way or the other. And I think that's what Peter was alluding to earlier when he was talking about the ultra conservative church or the ultra progressive church.
Yeah.
And I think that's a direct fallout of that overcorrectingness of where people fall.
Yeah. And honestly, as a society, we have treated this terribly wrong over the generations. Partially because we didn't understand it. We thought, that all orientations are choices that we make. We've thought that, people are just choosing to do the wrong thing and things that we consider, just not acceptable.
Yep.
And society as a whole has done great harm to people with different sexual orientations.
Absolutely. I agree.
And then you pull that into the church, and the church has doubled down.
Yeah.
Just literally doubled down. No mercy, no compassion, And so when we're talking about this issue, we're not talking about this in a way that says, if you have this orientation, you're a bad person.
Correct.
You're wrong. You're, going to hell. Whatever.
Yeah.
Because you remember when we started talking about these taboos, is drinking alcohol a straight line to hell?
Yeah.
No. Is saying a cuss word a straight line to hell? No. This, as much as you might want to think it is not.
Thank you.
It is not. There are sinful behaviors that we all participate in. Mm-hmm. And there are patterns, and there are orientations, and there all these kinds of things. There are people that are orientated to hyper heterosexual activity.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's every
We
bit.
probably all know one.
And
Probably
Peter
maybe
and
we've
I,
been one. I don't know.
we kind of talked about this a little bit Sunday evening after practice. Is all these things that we keep talking about a straight line to hell, and really the only thing that is a straight line to hell is lack of salvation.
Absolutely.
If you're not saved, that's your ticket to hell, not the things you do or any of that stuff.
Yeah. So the point I want to make right off the bat is about this marriage thing, because we're making the statement that any sexual activity outside of this marriage thing, and so what has happened is society and church now has really sort of requested that we redefine marriage, that we open it up to where we can have two men or two women, or whatever that spectrum might be, and they can be married. They can have lifelong monogamous relationships. So and I will say that yes, you can do that. Yep. Yes, you absolutely can do that.
But is that God's plan?
Is it within the God's design? No, it's not. It is not. Because here's this other sort of absolute statement that I'm going to make here, and this is based in not just one scripture, but basically through the whole Bible, that difference in sexes is an intrinsic part of what marriage is.
That's right.
That the difference between male and female, that's intrinsic. It's baked into the whole thing.
Yep.
And so when we say, does the Bible prohibit same-sex sexual relationships, the main question has to be, what is marriage?
Yeah.
It's not just a lifelong union between two consenting humans. It's a lifelong union between two consenting humans, male and female.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not really a marriage. And there's several reasons for that. I'll just touch on them just kind of quickly. It's because that there is a purpose beyond sex and beyond just companionship.
Hear that, all young men.
It's true. It
that.
is absolutely true.
Yeah.
One of the questions that I ask every prospective couple that comes to me for counseling, because I'm going to do their wedding, I tell them that I want you to write a mission statement for your marriage.
Yep.
Because what is your marriage going to do for the world? What is it going to be for the world? Because it's not just that you get to hole up in your house and not be lonely.
Yeah,
that's it.
And it's not so you can have somebody to have sex with.
That's right.
It's really it's a modeling. It's a witness to the world of who God is.
Yep.
And
right.
how God relates to His creation, and how God relates to how God relates to His church, and there's all sorts of this other sort of theological stuff sort of baked in. And so the fact that it's a man and a woman is like super important. It says when humans were divided, male and female, Adam says, "Hot dog." He says, "At last," and he says, "This is flesh of my flesh, bone of my bones," and so on and so forth. And then he says, this is why a man shall leave his father and his mother, and the two shall become one flesh.
Yeah.
Jesus echoes this. in Matthew. He's talking about, they're trying to bait Jesus into a conversation about divorce.
Yeah.
And he says, have you not read your own Bible? It says right there, for this reason, a man will leave his father. God created the male and female for this reason.
Yep.
That the man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh.
Yep. Leave and cleave.
Yes, and then you get into the whole idea of procreation. That is a very intrinsic part, and you say, well, not all couples will be able to have children.
That's very true.
Yeah, but it's the creation. It's a procreation potential.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that is the model for procreation. Yep. Sometimes things go wrong.
That's right.
Sometimes there's brokenness in other areas.
That's right.
Sometimes things go wrong. I've read a couple. I ain't even going to go into that. Couples who choose not to have children. There's a variety of thoughts on that.
Yeah, widow indeed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to make any statements on that.
You get into like fertility and all that stuff. That's a whole nother can of worms.
I know. Yeah. Oh gosh. Oh my gosh. Yes. Let's not go there.
Yeah. Let's not, because I have not done enough studying.
Okay. So then you could say, well, why then why can't we reinterpret that? Why can't it just be two consenting adults who happen to love each other? Why is that? It's not an okay thing. And so what usually happens is Christians will go to the Bible and they'll go to certain passages of Scripture, and usually they'll go right to Leviticus. And there's passages in Leviticus that we use, and it says that a man having sex with a man is an abomination.
Okay, yeah. I was going to ask, are we going through the opposing or supporting?
Well, I want to touch on these scriptures real quick, okay, because I want to expose the other side.
Okay.
In a little bit. So there's two passages in Leviticus that talk about, it says, you shall not lie with a man as with a woman. Such thing is an abomination. That's Leviticus 18:22. And then there is Leviticus 20:13. It says, if a man lies with a man as with a woman, both of them shall be put to death for their abominable deed. They have forfeited their lives.
Pretty serious.
Yeah, super uplifting.
Yeah, it's real nice.
They take this real lightly.
And then of course, what we usually go to is 1 Timothy 1:10. The law is good and instituted not for the good, but for sinners, the unchaste, the homosexuals, the kidnappers, the liars, the perjurers. That's that one. And then you see in Romans 1, you see a whole entire catalog of sins as a big list, and homosexuality is in there. And it says, because they preferred lies to truth, God handed them over to degrading passions. Their females exchanged natural relations for unnatural, and the males likewise gave up natural relations with females and burned with lust for one another. Males did shameful things with males. That's kind of how that goes.
And by the way, if you're trying to witness to anyone that is same-sex attracted, probably don't start with that.
Well, okay, so the other side of that then is in the church they said, no, those scriptures are not talking about homosexuality or same-sex attraction or LGBT. T is another thing.
So what are they talking about then?
Well, I'm going to get into it right now.
Because I'm confused on this. I really want to understand the other side.
Okay, what I'm going to do is first off, I want to read a little bit of this article, and this is from a very, very progressive Christian organization. Okay, and so they say, let's begin with some basics, and this is where we get into. Well, anyway, I'll speak on that in a minute. We have to avoid speaking in the singular. We should avoid thinking that there has only been one Christianity, one way of being Christian, one Christian response to homosexuality, or one way of understanding homosexuality among Christians. And so basically they say we must admit historically there have been and there still are different ways of being Christian.
There are,
okay. And then it says, There are Christians who appeal to biblical texts in order to justify their judgment and condemnation of homosexuality and homosexuals. Okay. And I'm using that term because they're using that term.
Yeah.
I would probably use different language.
Use any sexual sin there.
Well, yeah, for sure. Okay. So it says, no text in the Bible was written in English or in any modern language. All our modern Bibles are translations. That is true. Yes. Okay. So they talk about that for a little while. But then it says, as with any and all human efforts, every translation of the Bible is limited, not always correct, and at times outright wrong. That's where it starts to depart a little bit.
So are they now just questioning the flat out like accuracy of God's word?
Yeah, they say that there is human bias and human prejudice when it comes to not just the way the scripture was written, but also how we interpret it.
Yeah.
So basically, they're kind of really hinting at the fact that maybe the Holy Spirit was not involved.
Yeah.
That it's really
pretty
just
dangerous
kind of the
thinking.
way. He says, there has never existed a society or culture without prejudices and limitations. So there can never be a translation of the Bible that does not reflect the prejudices, biases, and limitations of its translator and of their society.
That's bold.
It is.
It's getting a little bit bolder.
So you'd have to have a new translation every 30 years.
Well, they say all translations of the Bible are attempts at understanding and interpreting the meaning of what was written many centuries ago in languages, circumstances, societies, and cultures very different from our own. That is absolutely true.
Yeah.
But then it says, for a translation not to falsify the original meaning of the text, it has to try reaching back into history. And I will say that's what biblical scholars have been doing for the last 2,000 years.
Yeah.
It's exactly what they've been doing.
Right. Yeah.
And I've read a bunch of them. So they talk about not, when we read the Bible, honestly, we can't make it try to fit our preconceived notions of what their meaning must be. I'm okay with that. So they go through some of these scriptures that talk about that we kind of use to talk about sexual brokenness and especially same-sex activity. Although it talks about temple prostitutes and some other things like that. But then it starts to get a little bit weird because they're saying that the Leviticus texts are really just talking about ritual purity. And they also talk about the fact that, well, it's listed in, kind of a list of things that you're supposed to do and not supposed to do. And most of those we don't even do anymore, like eating shellfish. You're not supposed to eat shellfish, and you're not supposed to wear clothes with two different kinds of fabrics and things like that. And so, I'm okay with that too. But what we do see in those particular texts and a few others is we kind of see God's general disposition to sexual activity that's outside the original design. Okay, so I think we can get that much from it.
Sure.
And then, we get into some of these New Testament texts, and even 1 Corinthians 6, the unjust will not inherit the kingdom of God, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor boy prostitutes, nor homosexuals. So we got all that stuff. Okay, so what the argument is that in the New Testament that the idea of a loving monogamous same-sex relationship did not exist. That homosexuality is same-sex activity was always power-oriented. So you go and you conquer a city. The first thing you do is go have man-to-man sex with as many of the leaders as you can to show them who's boss.
Where was that in Jericho?
Yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing. And then there was.
Pat, they didn't teach you that in the Army? Come on.
No, I missed that day. That's why we left Afghanistan. I'm sorry, bad joke.
So, and then it was, taking advantage of, there's this thing called pederasty. And pederasty is a real thing.
Yeah,
for sure a real thing.
Yeah.
And
what
so
is that?
That is taking advantage of a boy or a young man younger than you, or a slave.
Gotcha.
And so it was just this power over kind of thing.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Domination thing.
Yeah. And then the Caesars all engaged in same-sex activity and, things like that. So what they'll say is that since Paul didn't have a context for that what he's talking about must mean only that, not the kind of same-sex
loving relationship.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So what I've got here is I've got this book that I picked up a little while ago. It's by a guy named Preston Sprinkle, and he has a podcast called Theology in the Raw, and it's
I didn't put that together. That was who this is.
That's who this is. He's all PhD'd up and everything.
Yeah, I listened to Theology in the Raw, and I did not know. Oh, yeah?
I didn't know his name was Preston Sprinkle.
It is Preston Sprinkle. Yep. And he's a heterosexual dude. He's married, got a few kids.
Yeah.
But he became so troubled over the way that the church was handling the issue of sexual brokenness and all the sexual issues, that he ended up starting this whole ministry. And has spent his whole life speaking, writing, all this kind of stuff. In this book, basically, the title is self-explanatory. Does the Bible support same-sex marriage? And so he goes through all of these different arguments, and he is super fair about the whole thing. He brings up a point of agreement, and then he has a response to it as to why he believes this argument doesn't hold up.
Sure.
And so this is conversation number 4 that addresses this very issue. He says, according to this argument, these prohibition passages, including Leviticus, are not talking about consensual same-sex relationships between equals. Rather, they prohibit sexual exploitation, abuse, or other forms of non-consensual relationships. Or they address certain kinds of same-sex sexual relationships where one partner had a much higher social status than the person he was having sex with. Power differentials were built in. Okay, so his point of agreement says that actually did happen a lot. Mm-hmm. In fact, it probably was most of it.
Yeah.
Probably a vast majority. So the question then is, are the biblical prohibition passages referring only to abusive kinds of same-sex sexual relationships? So here's his response. The actual language of the prohibition passages does not seem to support this argument. Okay, so you take the Romans 1 passage. It says, because of this, God gave them over to shameful lusts. And then he talks about the women exchanging natural sexual relationships for the unnatural ones. Okay, so women and then men. Mm-hmm. So the power differential does not exist
between women.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah. This is chosen.
Yeah. And here's the thing. He could have used the words that really meant pederasty and abuse and things like that. He does not. He avoids those words and instead uses other words. And so he doesn't mention slaves and slave masters. Mm-hmm. He doesn't, he talks very generic terms between men and women. So it suggests that he does not have a particular kind of abusive relationship in view.
Yeah.
They were inflamed with lust for one another, mutually.
Oh, so then,
I was going to say, he's using very consensual language.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Committed shameful acts with other men, received in themselves the due penalty for their error. That language doesn't make sense if Paul was thinking only of an abusive kinds of situation.
Yeah.
And then this whole idea that he would introduce female same-sex sexual relationships. Mm-hmm. And he goes on in the chapter talking about ancient art, and that there were many instances of women with women and full-grown men with full-grown men.
Sure.
And many of them were holding hands in a particular way that would suggest that they were marrying each other.
Gotcha.
There's a lot of belief that in the Odyssey, the Iliad, that Achilles and Patroclus were actually lovers.
No, not cousins?
Yep. There's a lot of belief that that's it. And so when they say that Paul doesn't have a basis for using this language, I say, well, look back at your Greek literature, because
Yeah.
it's very common in Greek and Roman literature.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so in talking about the Romans passage, it's talking here about nowhere in the New Testament, as also nowhere in the Old Testament, this article says, is there any mention of what today is understood by homosexuality. Consequently, if we want to speak the evident truth, in no place does the Bible condemn homosexuality as a sexual orientation or a homosexual behavior among those who are homosexual.
What Bible they been reading?
But that's where we have to do is we have to redefine.
Well, see, I had a guy argue with me one time. He's actually a really good friend of mine, and he's just on the different side of the fence as I am when it comes to our ideologies. And we got to talking about this. This has been years ago, and it somehow the gay marriage thing had come up, and I was like, it's just not right biblically. And he said, where does it does not condemn homosexuality in the Bible? And I was like, yes, it does. And I didn't go to Leviticus because I knew they'd be like, well, that's Old Testament.
Yeah.
So I went to the New Testament, and it was one where it's the one where it says gave men up to unnatural and all that. And he said, well, it doesn't specifically say what they're doing. He said, so that doesn't mean that they're like he kind of tried to play on it that since the word was not specifically there of what it said.
Then my counter to that is, what is natural desire?
Yeah.
As defined by the Bible. And that is what's within the covenant of marriage.
Yeah.
And then that comes back to, what is a biblical defined marriage? So if it's outside of that,
Right.
That's what Paul's talking about.
Yeah.
And so we get to another argument here. And this is conversation number 10 in this book, and I think it's a very good good argument. Is that Jesus never mentioned homosexuality.
There you go. That's what a buddy would have said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't.
Yeah.
He didn't mention it. There's a lot of things he didn't mention.
Yeah.
So some people will say that even if Jesus would not have affirmed same-sex relationships, he seems to have been indifferent to the issue because he just never mentioned it.
Did he mention money laundering?
He mentioned money. I think he mentioned laundering at some point.
But Jesus does mention marriage, though.
Yes, he does. Here's his response, which I think is very balanced and very, very fair. He says, historically speaking, there's no reason why Jesus needed to address same-sex sexual relationships. Every Jew in Jesus' day condemned all forms of same-sex sexual behavior. Mm-hmm. If you examine all the statements made by ancient Jewish writers 500 years on either side of Jesus, 500 BC to AD 500, you won't find any statement by any Jewish writer that comes close to affirming same-sex sexual behavior. Every time it's mentioned, it's condemned. And that's
true.
And that's the way it is through all of Scripture.
So it would have been redundant for him to have even mentioned it.
The thing is, it says such widespread agreement in Judaism is remarkable given the diversity of Jewish views on all kinds of topics. For instance, some Jews loved the temple. Others thought it was corrupt. Some regarded the entire Old Testament as authoritative, while others said only the Pentateuch. Mm-hmm. Some believed in angels, some didn't. Some believed in an afterlife, where others didn't. All kinds of areas that they disagreed on and had arguments and debates over. Certain aspects of sexual ethics were also disputed. Some condemned intermarriage. Mm-hmm. Others were okay. Some believed that sex and procreation would exist in the New Age, while others did not. And of course, there was a well-known debate about divorce. Mm-hmm. He says if you ask 10 ancient Jews about 20 different ethical topics, you probably get 42 different answers.
That's good.
Yeah, that is good. But when it came to same-sex sexual relations, there was no dispute.
Yep.
Every single Jew thought they were morally wrong. So Jesus was a Jew.
Yeah.
And when he went around having these conversations with the religious leaders, he always addressed issues that were either disputed within Judaism or issues that he knew were wrong, they knew were wrong, and somebody had to say it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so he corrected it. So, it's like almost like we would say, okay, well, my pastor never preached that the earth is round.
So it's not round.
So, yeah, it might not be round. You know, so the whole
Yeah, that's a very good point.
I should have known it would come from you.
You should have.
Yes, exactly. So that's why this argument doesn't really hold up.
Yeah.
Because
But nobody wants to probe into the context.
Right.
I feel like that's one of my frustrations with a lot of these is when they do warp the text and warp the scriptures. It's like, are they looking at the context of the scripture? Like, because I mean, I don't know. That's one of my biggest frustrations.
As we do dig into the context and we dig into these points, either side, you become. It's just who we've become, especially in Western culture, is you're rather, homophobic, bigot, or you are completely universal.
You're an ally.
Yeah, it's like you're one or the other. So everyone is scared to talk about this subject because you're going to be in one of the buckets.
Well, and frankly,
regardless.
I'm scared to talk about it sometimes. I mean, I'll talk about it, in personal conversations a lot.
Sure.
Yeah.
But you notice as we're going along in this conversation, if you're listening to this and you're a person that has a same-sex orientation, you're feeling pretty weird right now.
Yeah.
Because it really feels like we're devaluing.
Yeah.
Or and that's not the purpose of this portion of our conversation.
Correct.
It's to help everybody understand how we get to the biblical place that we get to.
What's in the text.
Well,
that's it.
And that's why I feel like we keep kind of reiterating that all sexual sin, all sexual brokenness is, I mean, we all are sexually broken.
Yeah.
And there is no hierarchy here. Like, you're not going to be judged harder because that's the sexual sin you battle or something,
Right. Well, and one of the reasons we're talking about same sex and all of its iterations is because like these other ones are super obvious.
Yeah.
Fornication, adultery, hypersexuality. That
is true. Yeah.
Violent sexuality.
Yep.
We
can agree with that.
Yeah. This one is one we have to struggle with, and we need to struggle with it. We need to wrestle with it. So just a couple more little argument things here, and then we're going to turn it around and kind of look at our response to this.
Yeah.
One of the arguments is that the biblical writers didn't know about sexual orientation. Now, think about this. There's a difference between sexual behavior and sexual orientation, right?
Yeah.
So this is something that we really need to, especially as Christians, wrap our minds around. Because, the argument says that ancient biblical writers were unaware that some people are innately, like maybe from birth, attracted to the same sex. If they had known this, they wouldn't have spoken negatively about same-sex relationships. There's one scholar that says the reason why Paul argued as he did is that he believed that all people were heterosexual. Another scholar, a woman, says if Paul were confronted with same-sex attracted Christians unable to change their orientation, I do not believe that he would respond with the same words we find in Romans, 1 Corinthians, and 1 Timothy. So they just didn't know.
But what about, could that not apply to when he refers to like the drunkard or people in that manner? I mean, they almost have a tendency towards alcohol or, being drunk. I mean, I don't know. I'm not quite jiving with them here.
Well, and I see the point, and Preston sees their point too.
Yeah.
Because his point of agreement here is a point of agreement I would have too. The sexual orientation is a modern concept. It's a modern discovery.
Yeah.
Because even as late as I would say, maybe even the 70s and 80s, if you had an orientation other than regular old heterosexual, you made a bad choice.
Yeah, it was strictly a choice.
Yeah, it's like who hurt you? That you would go do that, and how stupid could you be that you want to act in this way and pursue this, and it was, and I remember, I'm just as guilty as anybody else about being demeaning, all the jokes, it was terrible.
Yeah.
Because, and this is kind of what they're saying about Paul.
Yeah.
I didn't know about orientation. The world didn't know about orientation. So they're saying, well, if Paul had known about orientation and how, deep-seated it is and how seemingly permanent it is, then he would have let up a little bit.
Well, I feel like it changes the way we behave and the way we react to it. We don't validate.
Well, and that's the argument. It doesn't
change the sin aspect of it.
Yeah, well.
That's just like we understand alcoholism now, too. And we don't validate that as we don't tell anyone, it's okay to go be an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Well, no, and we can have more compassion on somebody addicted to alcohol because we understand it as a disease. There's a certain chemical makeup that gives you a propensity to, and it's not just alcohol; it's to, any kind of substance.
Yeah. My Dr. Pepper addiction.
Hey man, don't go to meddling.
Yeah.
So he said the part of the argument is a plain reading of the Bible shows that it doesn't talk about sexual orientation, at least in its modern form. It talks about sexual behavior and even sexual desire, but it doesn't specifically talk about the exact thing we now call same-sex sexual orientation.
Yep.
And that is that's at there are some kernels of truth right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Preston, who has his PhD in this stuff, it has done some extremely rigorous research. When you read this, if you want to know how much research somebody's done, look and see how many footnotes there are at the end of every chapter.
Yeah.
There are a lot of Christian books out there that are a lot, advice about marriage and sex and all this stuff. 0 footnotes.
Yeah.
So it's like
AKA opinions.
This came from me.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's exactly right.
AKA opinions.
Yeah.
This is filled with
Citations.
footnotes. He says, first, I think it's overstating the case to say that the notion of sexual orientation was absent in the ancient world. There are some ancient writers that talk about an innate and seemingly fixed desire for the same sex that some people are born with. They didn't know to call it sexual orientation, but the characteristics of what they were describing are exactly that. Yeah. Aristotle said that some same-sex desires come from habit, but others spring from nature.
They're just born that way.
There.
I'd say that's pretty accurate.
Hey, and I feel like most of us probably know somebody that they're like, man, even their parents might be like, I knew when they were 5.
Sure.
Absolutely.
I worked with a guy. He had 3 sons, and actually 2 of them, me and him had this conversation a lot. He was an atheist. He was a very big atheist, and so we would have debates quite often. He had 3 sons. 2 of them were gay. And I asked him, I said, man, do you think that they choose this, or do you think that they were born that way? And he said, they were born that way. He said, I knew when they were very small that they were gay.
Yeah.
Well, and once again, what does the scientific community say? It is a very complicated combination of genetics and environment.
Yeah.
Sure.
So we can't dismiss one or the other. And we also have no idea, no understanding of what the combination is.
Yeah.
They can identify both at work, and it's not up to us to figure it out.
Yeah,
it's up to us to respond.
That's right.
Okay, so you not only have Aristotle, there's another ancient writer that believed that a particular form of same-sex erotic desire was biological and inborn. Parmenides believed that, okay, if you're sensitive, close your ears. Children, close your ears. Men who desired to be penetrated were generated in the act of conception. He lists several others.
Yeah.
Once again, they don't know to call it same-sex orientation, but that's exactly what they were talking about. So he goes, this other ancient writer says, if the sun and moon are in masculine signs, and Venus is also in a masculine sign in a woman's chart, women will be born who take on man's character and desire intercourse with women like men.
Talking about born under a bad sign.
Another text written around the time of Paul says that if the sun and moon are at a particular location when a woman is born, she will be a lesbian, desirous of woman, and if the native is a male, he will be desirous of males.
Wow.
So the idea that sexual orientation was not a thing or was not even conceived of is not true.
Yeah.
Right.
It was around. So more than likely, and he talks about also the astrological and magical texts.
Yeah.
These were like the comic books in the National Enquirer. They were passed around, for in the common people.
Gotcha.
So it wasn't just those who knew how to write and knew how to read. This was fairly common knowledge. So
Gotcha.
It's not fair and it's not accurate to say that the notion of sexual orientation was absent in Paul's day.
Right.
So it's most likely that Paul knew exactly what he was writing about, chose his words carefully, and said exactly what he meant.
Yeah.
That's kind of the idea there. So
there's a lot of footnotes there, even on that second.
Yeah, and I will,
ridiculous.
And I will go ahead and say, like, I fall on that side. Like, I don't feel like Paul chooses his words by accident.
I agree. And also, I honestly believe that Paul was obviously speaking to the church, and in Timothy's case, speaking to Timothy about how he should deal with the situations in his church. I believe it was cautionary.
Right.
I don't believe Paul was, super condemning, all this kind of thing.
And also, I think this comes up a lot with Paul as well, because who do we know that Paul was trying to reach?
Oh, he's always reaching the Gentiles.
Yes, right?
Absolutely.
And this is common practice in the Greco-Roman world. So it's something he needs to address.
Yeah, and in one of the chapters in this book, he also says that this kind of thing was not only present, but it was on the rise. Mm-hmm. That it was really gaining some steam there.
Sure.
And Paul is. And it's interesting, too, because he goes into a little bit of an academic section in here where he's talking about the passage in Romans 1, and he identifies how many times, and it's like 6 or 7 times in that passage where he's making a direct hyperlink to Genesis 1 and 2. Mm-hmm. He's using the same exact language there.
Yep.
Also, we can say that the Leviticus passages don't matter, but we get clues from when we read the Septuagint. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we read the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament.
Gotcha.
Okay,
yeah.
So we get clues here. So if we have this word, a man lying with a man. Okay, so that is a particular Hebrew word that has to be translated into Greek, and the word is malakoi, which means man bed. Okay, so we say, okay, well, throw out Leviticus, except for the fact that when Paul when he talks about this, he uses malakoi.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So he uses the exact same word that the Hebrew was translated into.
Right.
So, it kind of brings it back in, because we have to consider it again.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because Paul deliberately chooses that word instead of some other words.
That's right.
Okay. So here's the final argument that I really, really wanted us to get to, because this is super important. And this argument is that that we should all be open and progressive and inclusive and affirming and accept everything as God's design, because the traditional view of marriage is harmful toward gay and lesbian people. And so this is probably at the heart of our discussion, because the society, culture, and the church have not treated people who have different orientations well.
Yeah.
Right.
They just have not. And so I think there's some let me get into the nuances of this. Okay. So yes, it can be if used incorrectly, but I'm going to say this right off the bat and then I'll unpack it. We like to say in the world of the Second Amendment, right? What do we say? Guns don't kill people.
People kill people.
Yeah.
It's true.
Theology doesn't harm people.
People do.
People harm people.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
And so this is where we kind of, start to bring in this whole thing. Okay, so I want to unpack this argument a little bit, because it is absolutely super important. And I know one of the great works that Preston does, he gives these seminars, and sometimes there'll be a whole weekend, and it's dealing with parents.
Yeah.
Whose children have come out. And it's like he helps, sort of walk them through what do you do and what do you not do.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he continues to say is you don't have to reject your own historical orthodox view of human sexuality as outlined in Scripture in order to accommodate your child.
That's right.
And it's okay, but there are compassionate, wonderful ways of loving your child.
Yeah.
And because honestly, most of this harm, I would say the vast majority of this harm is caused by family rejection.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I would say so.
Yeah. So
For sure.
So I'm going to go through some of these statistics real quick, and I want you who are listening out here, I want you to, if you're struggling with this orientation, I want you to hear this as positive, as healing words, because that's where we're going with this. And if you're not in that orientation, then I want us to use this to kind of, begin to turn the way we think a little bit.
That's right.
So he says this argument is arguably the most popular and most powerful. He says, I don't think I've read a single book or talked to any person who affirms same-sex marriage who doesn't appeal to the harm argument. So there's a writer named Matthew Vines. He wrote a book called The Gay Christian, a very, very controversial book. But he says non-affirming beliefs about same-sex relationships and transgender people contribute to serious harm in LGBTQ people's lives. And he shows in some of his studies that lesbian, gay, and bisexual young adults who reported higher levels of family rejection during adolescence were 8.4 times more likely to report having attempted suicide, 5.9 times more likely to report high levels of depression, and 3.4 times more likely to use illegal drugs compared with peers from families that reported no or low levels of family rejection. So
you got to affirm them.
Well,
I feel like that statistic with rejection is spot on.
Yeah.
Well, and how many, especially young men, I think it affects in different ways that whose parents got divorced when they were like 13 years old at that terrible time.
Yeah.
Yep.
They've taken decades sometimes to heal from that.
Sure.
Because it feels like rejection to them.
Well, think about this too. I want you to rewind the clocks around here. About 30 years ago, you let interracial marriage happen around here within families.
Yeah.
There would be rejection.
Yeah.
That was very common here.
Yeah.
And that leads people to a lot of destructive decisions as well.
Well, and we've talked about this too, that almost 40% of young women who get abortions are from church families.
Yep.
Because
Can't ruin that status.
Well, and they don't want to go through the shame.
Yeah.
And the rejection.
That's
Would
right.
that be, I'm curious on this. So he had people, or the study shows you were rejected or basically no response. Where's that in between where you had the family that's like, I mean, does this take into account the family that's like, look, we don't agree. We think this is wrong, but we love you. We still love you. We're not kicking you out of here, but we do. I wonder, do they take that into account?
I think that's the point of his argument, is to say that we don't do that.
Gotcha.
Right. And he's talking about as opposed to no level of family rejection, which means that you would just affirm, or low levels, which would be more what you just described.
Yeah.
And the part of the deal too is, we have to relearn some of our language.
Sure.
It does no good. I just firmly believe it does no good to tell somebody with sexual brokenness, what you're doing is a sin.
Yeah, that's not helpful at all.
If you were doing something and you didn't know it was a sin, then I would tell you.
Yeah.
And you would hear me.
Yep.
Because you know that I care about you.
If you saw me doing heroin in an alleyway, I would hope you'd come up and be like, Logan, you got to clean your act up.
Look, man, there's...
I'd bring you some clean needles and then
a few years ago, I heard this expression, and I live by it, is no one's going to care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
And
It's
that's
true.
fact.
And here's the deal. Okay, we're going to unpack the rest of this in a minute. But the thing I think when you have a friend or a family member or a child, the first thing to say is, I understand that you have something really difficult going on in your life right now.
Yeah.
You're struggling.
Okay, so imagine this, and this is the case with the vast majority of people in this what they call a sexual minority category. Okay, they realize one day, they don't just wake up one day. They've been kind of feeling it a while, but they realize it gets to a certain level that they are not attracted to the opposite sex.
Right.
And it usually comes at that sort of coming of age time. Now, maybe like your friend, other people could see it from way back when.
Yeah.
But it creeps up on them. They finally realize. Everybody else, every other boy, every other girl, they act this way, and I don't feel that way.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so how would you feel if you woke up tomorrow and you had just like zero desire for your wife? But that guy across the street looks really good.
Yeah, Logan,
my
how
world
would you feel?
would be turned upside down. I can say for sure.
Yeah.
I tell people to check the water.
Absolutely.
I'd be wondering what's in the water.
But I mean,
But it's true. Yeah, I mean that would be.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know what I would do.
I'd run off into the woods.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't know how to respond.
No.
I mean, you really wouldn't.
Yeah.
Now, tack onto that, as soon as you're like, okay, this is what it is. This is where I'm at. And then everyone telling you, well, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Straight,
But actually, what you usually do first is you absolutely cover it up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You bury it as far down as you can possibly do.
That's
And
right.
you try to act, normal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the interesting thing is I have had more than one person come and visit me in my office to tell me just that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's the brave one.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to imagine to actually go and voice that. That would definitely be.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, hey, Pastor, I need to talk to you tomorrow. Can we have some coffee? I think I'm gay. It's like, you're not gonna.
Yeah.
You're just not gonna do that.
Yeah,
No.
that's tough, man.
So another statistic that I read in this book is that 94% of all same-sex attracted people have prayed at least one time for God to make them straight.
Yeah.
Okay, so to say, I think what you're doing is wrong. They think what
I
they're
was
doing
going to
is
say, yeah, they're aware.
Yeah.
They don't need you to
aware.
tell them. They understand the implications of all this stuff.
And I would say that's no different than anything else in church, is when we tell people, hey, you know what you're doing's wrong.
Oh, man.
Believe me, they know.
Do you think that in the day, because a lot of times I feel like the people that are screaming like the loudest at you are actually trying to seek some sort of validation?
Absolutely.
Do you think the ones that are going around doing the prides and doing these things today, or not prides, doing the parades, things like that, do you think they truly think it's okay, or do you think they're trying to seek validation that it's okay?
Well, what does everyone want? Everyone wants to feel like they're a part of a community, a
Yeah.
part of a family.
That they're loved and supported.
And then
Yeah.
when your own home is rejecting you, and then your church
Yeah.
rejects you,
Yeah, because if you're
where
home,
else will you go?
that's
Yeah.
the thing.
Yeah.
There's this in his points of agreement. He has a friend named Drew Harper, a gay man raised in the church, and he says this: to be homosexual in the American evangelical church is to be dead. You are an outcast, an orphan, a refugee, a diseased person.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%.
And it says, another gay friend of mine says it like this: having what I call the abomination gospel drilled into you at such a young age and told you are so other that God doesn't want to even try to reach you warps a person's view of both God and themselves.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure if it's possible to ever truly undo this damaged view of God and self. A self-deprecating inner monologue is part of the DNA of an LGBT plus person who was raised in the church in culture war USA.
That's right.
We're constantly questioning, can God really love me because I'm an abomination? No matter how deeply we love God or accept that God's grace extends to us, we still have this undercurrent of self-loathing and shame.
Yep.
And this is in his argument agreement section.
Yeah.
And on this area here, I will not say that our belief on any of these things are wrong. I'm saying our response
That's the thing.
to
Yeah.
it is wrong.
See, and that's the thing. That's why I don't like being put into one bucket or the other
That's right.
bucket. Because, yes, I do hold to a historically Christian
Orthodox.
view,
Yeah.
orthodox view of human sexuality,
Yeah.
but I don't ever want to beat anybody over the head with
That's
it.
right.
Yeah.
And
Well, you're
so-
not going to bring them to the gospel by doing so.
No.
You can't beat salvation into somebody's head.
That's true.
Yeah.
And I got news for you. Me and Peter have talked about this several times. Is what is the church? And I don't care where you're watching, what church you attend. What is your church's response going to be when a homosexual couple walks into your church? Because it's going to happen at some point. It's going to happen. What is your response? And if it's anything other than "I'm glad you're here, welcome," you've messed up.
Well, that's where we have to start, right?
That's right.
And, I was actually in, this is some years ago, I was in a Cumberland Presbyterian church, not too far from here. And it was out in the country. And, it was obviously a very conservative area. And this older woman, we had just we'd been singing there. And this older woman came up to me and she said, I need to introduce you to somebody. I said, okay, cool. We go over and there's a trans girl.
Mm-hmm.
So used to be a boy, now, identifies as a girl. And she said, this is my granddaughter. And, it's like, this is before I even really thought about this stuff a whole lot.
Yeah.
Yep.
And this is where a lot of us are right now. We know more what not to do.
Yep.
Than what to do.
Yep.
And that's an okay place to start.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful. So you're talking about, if a same-sex couple comes in, or if a trans person comes in, or whatever. I mean, our first instinct is what he calls the ick factor.
Yeah.
I don't know if I like that. But how much of an ick factor did Jesus have?
Yeah.
When he walked up to the tax collector's booth.
Yep.
And said, come follow me.
Yeah.
How much of an ick factor did he have with the woman caught in adultery, drugged before him naked?
Regardless of how it plays out, their time at that church and how you handle it, regardless how it plays out, if you botch it from the very beginning, they're gone. They're gone.
And you've become part of the hurt.
That's right.
You have,
That's
and I mean, I can honestly say, like I said, man, I would be, if you were around the clock 5 years ago, I would have been as guilty as the rest. I mean, maybe not even 5 years ago.
Yeah,
since we're pulling, since we've been kind of pulling these blocks down, it's got me thinking, like, man, what would I? Because I'd have been the same. I'd have been like, do we want them in the church?
I know.
And it's like, well, yeah. I mean, we've talked about the church, and I hate it's a cheesy cliche, but it's like the church is like a hospital.
Yeah.
And you just don't go to a hospital if you're well.
Yep.
And I mean, none of us are well.
That's
why
right.
we go to church.
There's one of these catalog of sins that Paul goes off. I don't remember exactly where it is off the top of my head, but he goes off and he's like, there are these kind of people and there are those kind of people. And then he says, and such were some of you.
Yes.
Yep.
But you were washed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that's just a good kind of starting point for us.
Yeah.
We may not know what to say or what to do, but I think we can know what not to say and what not to do.
Yeah, not to say, welcome, you sinners.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Have you read Leviticus?
Welcome to Holly Grove. Do you want to sit in the hell section?
Yes.
The sinning or not sinning section. Well, it's all the sinning section.
Yeah.
Anyway, and he makes some really good points, because this is his wheelhouse. This is the kind of work that he likes to do. And so he says, first, what is the cause of the harm? And some say it's the theology. It's your limiting marriage to one man, one woman. Okay. So he's gonna unpack that. He says, this is one possibility. It's true that most parents who kick their gay kids out of the house or force them into conversion therapy. If you don't know what that is, that's you put them through this boot camp to try and make them not gay anymore.
Gay camp.
Okay.
Yeah. And
That's a real thing.
yes, they have them. Not too many of them these days, because even Christian leaders have recognized that it does way more harm than good.
So that didn't sound good. That makes me think of the TV show. There was Queer Eye for the straight guy, but did you ever see the other one, Straight Plan for the gay man?
No, I
No.
That was on Comedy Central, and they would take a very openly gay dude, and they'd put him with like these 2 or 3 straight guys, and they'd take him like shooting and all this stuff.
Oh my Lord!
Yeah, it was hilarious. That's what I'm thinking of. That's the straight plan for the gay man.
There it is.
All right.
And he says it's true that most of the people that do this sort of thing believe in a traditional view of marriage.
Yeah.
But correlation doesn't prove causation.
That's right.
Some Christians are also blatant racists. Some might even use the Bible to justify their racist views, but this doesn't therefore mean that the Bible is the problem.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are a number of things that could also be causing the harm. Ignorance about the complexities of sexuality, which is kind of where we're, opening up here.
It's hard to understand an issue someone goes through if you don't go through
if
that
you haven't
issue.
done it. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Fear of the other, which is what you brought up.
Yeah.
Social pressure to dislike people that are different than you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then we 20th century perspectives about masculinity, things like that. And then assumptions about people choosing to be gay. You could make a whole big list of these kinds of things that would cause harm.
Yeah.
So he says sweeping generalizations like Christians and gay people, like we're putting them all in, one box. He says it's very unhelpful because every gay person is not harmed by every Christian person.
That's right.
Every Christian person does not harm every gay person.
That's right.
So they're not harmed. Well, he says, what about the hundreds of thousands of gay people who believe in a historically Christian view of marriage and sexual ethics? They don't say they're harmed by the theology they believe in, even if they've been hurt by fellow Christians who hold to the same view.
Yeah, they recognize that the theology is not what's hurting them.
Yep.
And this is a beautiful story right here. He says, it's certainly true that some Christians have harmed some gay people. Maybe even a lot have harmed a lot. It's probably true. It's also true that some non-Christians harm gay people.
That's right.
It's also true that some Christians help gay people. Mm-hmm. He says, one of my friends has worked with more than 5,000 gay people and their families, helping them toward reconciliation, understanding, and love. As a result, he's received countless responses that go something like, I wanted to kill myself and now I want to live after talking to you. I once asked my friend how many gay people he thinks would have committed suicide if not for the pastoral work he did in their life. He is super humble, so I had to drag it out of him, but he ended up saying that it's been about 500.
Dang.
And my friend passionately believes in a traditional Christian sexual ethic. 500 gay kids saved from suicide by a man who believes that sex difference is a part of marriage, an inherent part of marriage. So
you can hold the traditional view.
Yes.
But if you go about it the right way, you can still reach these people.
Exactly
Absolutely.
right. That's exactly right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, I have a good friend who is just so much smarter than me. And he's an academic guy. He's got the degrees and everything. And we spend a good amount of time together. And so he's my phone a friend guy.
Yeah.
If I need to, know. And so we were talking about this because we're going through this in our denomination right now.
Yeah.
And we've got one side, wanted to push everything very progressive, and they've reinterpreted all these scriptures like we talked about. And then the other side, sadly, some of them are way on the other side, and they're downright, mean and rotten about it. But then there are a bunch of us that are kind of right in that middle. We definitely hold to a orthodox view of human sexuality.
Yeah.
But we want to change the narrative a little bit. So I said, is there any way that you can, reinterpret these scriptures and things like that? And he said, no, they're just, you have to do so many interpretive gymnastics. That's the way he put it, in order to make this mean what you want it to mean.
That's right.
And there's no other way. And honestly, there's a part of me that wishes I could just go there.
Mm-hmm.
It just make everything so much easier to deal with.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But
I can't get there.
No, I can't either.
And I think if you do a proper study, I don't think you can. But on that same hand, it's what we said earlier, is I don't think, I call it the overreaction. We see it in our presbytery right now. Rather this hyper conservative, downright hateful response, or the others,
I know.
or the other side.
And neither one is helping anybody.
That's right.
What we need to do is we need to have compassion.
That's right.
We need to lead with compassion. Now, I wanted to close with one thing we didn't talk about.
Freddie Mercury.
That's right. We did not, because nobody was talking about Freddie Mercury until after. Yeah. Anyway, but I do want to talk about this idea that there's a difference between biological sex and gender.
Okay.
And we're not going to get into the whole transgender issue. That can be another episode for another time if we want it to be. But there is biological sex. Everybody's born one or the other, unless you've got a combination of body parts, which is a whole other category.
Yeah.
But your gender is the way that you perceive your sexual imagination.
Okay.
So you can be a biological male and perceive that you are a woman.
That's the modern view on that, or is
That's they would call it scientific research and revelation.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
But that's what they say, that science, physical science, biological science, and psychological science, that's what they'll say.
To form gender.
And there is a real thing called gender dysphoria.
Yeah.
Where it's like a disorientation.
Yeah.
It's like I know I have man parts, but I don't feel like a man.
Gotcha.
That is a diagnosable psychological condition.
Yeah.
That would be right in the same category with what we used to call schizophrenia or bipolar, and all those kinds of things. Now, so when you're dealing with gender issues and orientation issues, you're dealing with something that's larger than yourself. It's something that you didn't make up in your own mind.
Yeah.
And that feels so permanent that it almost isn't worth living sometimes.
Yeah.
And so then that's compounded with societal rejection and familial rejection and certainly church rejection.
Yeah, for sure.
So these are really, really hard issues. And I came across this statement on human sexuality from Denver Seminary, and I thought it was so brilliantly worded. I thought it was, and it deals with these exact issues. It says, sadly, human sinfulness, which emerges from both original and individual choices to sin, impacts every aspect of human existence, including sexuality and all interpersonal relationships. So, once again, we're not drilling down on one thing as being worse than the other.
Yeah.
Now, it says, as it relates to sexuality, sin results in various forms of alienation and brokenness. Some of these forms result directly from personal sinful choices. Some result more indirectly from the effects of sinful choices by other people. Still, other forms ripple out from the broad effects of sin on creation in general.
Yeah.
We see things that are outside of God's design.
Sure.
That happen because of this fallen world.
That's right.
Diseases are not God's design.
Yeah, cancer is not God's design.
We have, conditions and disorders and, things that fall outside of God's design. Now, I don't want to call all these, different kinds of orientations. I don't want to do that. But he's saying that this is the broad effects of sin on creation in general.
Yeah.
The need for Christ's redemption and the possibility of that redemption are coextensive with the dimensions, the expressions, and the results of sin. In other words, Christ's redemption is bigger than any of our sins.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I will say also that Christ's redemption happens no matter. It isn't evidence that you are redeemed that all of a sudden now you're fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's like we said, how many of them have prayed to be stripped?
absolutely. Almost every one of them.
Yeah.
It says, this implies the radical need both for both forgiveness related to sexual sin and for restoration of our capacities for wholeness. That's the key, the capacity for wholeness.
Yep.
No matter what our condition, no matter what our state, no matter what orientation, we have a capacity for wholeness.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to skip down a little bit. It goes on to some other really cool stuff, but it says the fall of humans, tragic effect on every dimension of human existence does not necessarily imply personal moral responsibility for sexual desires that depart from God's design from human sexuality, or for experienced gender incongruence that departs from God's design for personhood. Did you get all that, Pat? I got most of it. It does not necessarily imply personal moral responsibility for these orientations or for this gender incongruence.
Yeah.
Okay. Rather, the fall implies moral responsibility for our actions.
There it is.
How one stewards sexuality so that humans can flourish and experience God's design. Okay, so I'm going to skip down to this last part. Redemption involves not only forgiveness, but also empowerment for godly choices and the availability of God's grace to follow God's design for human sexuality. Christ's redemption provides grace to live faithfully as unto the Lord, whether sexual brokenness is the result of personal choices or the inexplicably tragic consequences of the fall or an inscrutable combination of the two. We recognize that an individual's ability to appropriate God's grace will vary in capacity and timing based on the nature and pervasiveness of their brokenness. Okay.
Very well said.
I know, it's just incredible. If you read the whole thing, it is really quite brilliant. But basically what it says is that just like all of us are a work in progress, any one of these conditions, if you want, are a work in progress.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so just like God has grace and mercy and patience toward us, that we are to extend grace and mercy and patience to one another.
And you and I talked about this a little Sunday night as well, as some people won't be fully delivered from some of these things.
That's exactly right. But I want to really finish with this. The beautiful thing is, through the way we respond, there's been some really sort of rays of hope in this whole thing. Because there are times when, I'll tell you what, the whole sexual brokenness landscape that we see in the movies and the commercials and I'm not talking about just same sex. It's everything.
Yeah.
It's everything. And pretty soon we're going to be seeing, all of these polyamory relationships being displayed in commercials and TV and everything, where you have multiple partners all living in the same house, raising children. And
I think what's coming next is pedophilia.
Oh, that's very possible. That very well may happen.
All levels of promiscuity.
Yeah, but when we look at all of this, there are rays of hope. And there is a, we hinted at it here. Preston talks about this in not only this book. He's got a book called Embodied that is just a brilliant book that unpacks this whole thing, where it comes from, what do we do about it, well, how do we respond. It's a beautiful book. But the cool thing about it is, and Preston is involved to a degree with this, but there is a growing community, and we're talking thousands and thousands by now, of people who are same-sex attracted. And, we have to be careful again about the terms that we use. Some don't prefer that term. Some prefer gay. Some prefer,
whatever the non-derogatory one for you is, that's what we mean.
Just tread lightly on all that stuff, know. And sometimes it's okay to ask somebody, I don't want to trigger you, tell me how to do this.
Yeah.
But there's a growing community of people that are same-sex attracted that have committed to following Jesus.
Sure.
And living within the God's original design for human sexuality, which means that they're not going to act on their attraction. Yeah. Which generally means that they're just going to be celibate. And I actually know some of these people. Yeah. And they're beautiful Christian people. And so I think it's very fair to say that the orientation itself, it may be tragic. It may be something undesirable. It may be something that you struggle with, but that is not sinful nature in and of itself.
Sure.
Because I know that my orientation can go in a million different directions. But self-control is a fruit of the Holy Spirit.
I was just thinking that as that self-control, and if any believer didn't have that self-control, we'd all be in really bad shape.
Yeah.
Worse than we already are anyway. Yeah. And I mean, seriously, that's where we got to get to. I guess for me, it's the hierarchy game, and I don't like that. I don't like when someone says, well, this person's same-sex, homosexual, whatever you want to call it, but this person is, well, they just do this. He just cheated on his wife twice. Yeah. Or things. No, that's not how that works.
And, come on, people, men and women, our secret sins that we do behind closed doors.
That's right.
For some, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
That's right.
And that's their orientation. Yeah. And God calls us away from acting out on our orientation sometimes.
Yeah.
Scripture tells us clearly that we all have a propensity to sin.
Yes.
We are bent toward sin.
Yep.
So we are all orientated, if you will.
We're all sin oriented.
Orientated. We create a lot of good words.
We do.
Yeah. That one needs to be on the shirt.
It probably will be. So the bottom line. Well, and let me say too. Now would be a challenge for a lot of churches, and I'm not necessarily. I'm not necessarily recommending this right now because frankly the world may not be ready for this. But there are some churches that I know of who have pastors on their pastoral team that are same-sex attracted but fully committed to the Orthodox Christian view of human sexuality.
Sure.
They live according to it. They teach according to it. They would never teach anything else. And they are serving in pastoral leadership, preaching, and going about their business as a Christian minister. How do you think about that?
It's it's pretty mind-blowing, but if, as you say, they're not acting on it, they're not sinning. It's the same brokenness we all deal with, and they're not acting on it.
I know plenty of people and pastors who were drug addicts.
Yeah.
That desire is always going to be there.
Yeah.
They're always going to be an addict, but they don't act on it.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to sit here and take away from the work that the Lord does through people just because of an attraction to sin.
Yeah.
Because we all have it.
Well, and I think too, how much more valuable could that pastor be in welcoming?
Oh yeah, his empathy towards people struggling with that, especially, or just I guess sexual brokenness
in general
is going to be way better.
I was just going to say, we were just talking about how hard it is for us to relate to the situation. We haven't been in it.
Yeah.
What if there was a pastor that struggles with it?
Right.
That was right there with it.
Right.
I think they would be the perfect person to minister to that.
Well, I mean, like you said, the former addict. You're always addicted once you're addicted one time, right?
Yep.
And we see that it's fairly common.
Yep.
For that pastor then to be able to minister so well. We have a couple of those right around here.
Yep. We people involved in prison ministry or people who struggled with stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Or had family members struggle with it.
So all in all, I guess really what we're going to go to here now. We didn't really have. I mean, we could do 5 episodes on this stuff because there's so many. There's 21 arguments in this book. We hit maybe 3.
Yeah.
And so I didn't. And we don't really have time to just unpack every single scripture and just break it all down and tear it all apart. But we wanted to just kind of give you a clear picture of where we stand, of where our church stands, and there's a big controversy about being affirming and inclusive all the way through people in ministry, and I don't believe that those who are practicing a lifestyle that are outside of God's design need to be in that position.
Well, what did we say? What was the statistic?
Ambiguity.
Yeah.
Oh, what was the statistic on the all-inclusive churches?
Oh, man. Yeah. I did. I just saw this today that.
Was it 58?
Well, I don't want to be, I try not to be, like negative toward different denominations, but there are some very large mainline, what we would call mainline denominations.
Yeah.
One of them in particular has declined by 50% in the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. Another by 35, another by 45. That almost every single denomination that has reinterpreted Scripture. In fact, there are a couple of denominations that just this week in their assemblies have mandated that all of their ministers perform same-sex marriages.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's not a problem for some, and it's a problem for others.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be, and so anyway, the logic has been up until now that churches are going to have to get with the program. They're going to have to just, let's just go with the reinterpretations of scriptures. Let's go ahead and just be open, affirming. We will affirm this as God's design.
Yeah,
that God designed heterosexual people and homosexual people and this kind of sexual person and that kind of sexual person.
It's all good.
Okay. It's all okay. And all of them could be ministers. All of them can be elders. And we'll just, we'll make sure that we take any sort of non-inclusive language out of our hymns and out of our scripture teaching, and, let's remove all that stuff, and everybody's going to be really good, and we'll sing campfire songs, and it'll all be wonderful.
Yeah.
And these denominations are tanking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you say, oh, well, but all the young people will be going there, right? No, they're not.
Yeah. They're not.
People are seeking, it's counter to what we would hear. I know. But people are seeking truth.
Yeah.
But in the right way.
In the right way. That's the big deal. I think that, I have young people for children.
Yeah.
And they would have a real problem with any one of their gay friends being abused in any kind of way.
Yeah.
Or talked down to.
Yeah.
Or
Absolutely.
joked about or anything. And I would have a problem with that too.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that they, they believe everything about their lifestyle is okay.
Yes.
I'm not going to speak for all my children, but but that's, I guess I just use that as kind of an example.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just a lot of brokenness in this world today.
Yeah.
And I want the opportunity for all of us to minister to each other. And one of the things that he says at the end of this book is something I think that we all need to take into consideration. He says, it's a passage where Jesus is talking about eunuchs. And eunuchs in their day were certainly castrated males. Mm-hmm. And he says some eunuchs are born that way. So they're born either without the parts or the parts don't work.
Yeah.
They're made that way by others, or they chose to be that way themselves. Mm-hmm. But he said, there's going to be, I can't remember exactly how he says it. It's going to be a good environment for them in this present age. And so he's making the point in here that what Jesus is really meaning by that is, where are they going to find love and find community? It's going to be in the church.
That's right.
Yeah.
And he said one of his gay friends says, the biggest question for a gay person who holds to an orthodox view of human sexuality is, who's going to take care of me when I get old?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the answer has to be us.
The church.
It has to be.
Yeah.
And we don't have to condone. We don't have to put a rubber stamp on. We don't have to affirm this, that, or the other. We just have to understand with compassion that there's something going on in their life that is going to be a struggle.
Yeah.
And we need to help them.
That's going to be my final word. My final word tonight is you don't have to affirm to have compassion.
That's right.
You don't have to agree with someone's lifestyle to have compassion on.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, and I'm absolutely with you. And I wish that we could bust that out across the whole globe, because we live in this age where if you don't condone, you hate. And we don't hate them.
Nope.
There's no hate here.
Nope.
If we didn't get into it, but I'll tell you right here, I don't hate people that live together before they get married.
Even though that
is a sin.
Yeah.
I don't hate people that have premarital sex. I don't hate gay people. And you can tell them that, we don't want to tell them that way, but, let them know your stance and all that. It doesn't mean you don't.
What I would hope is that anybody from any walk of life, with any kind of condition, with any kind of background and past and history, if they walked into our church, they would immediately feel loved and a part of the family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Over time, they would hear truth.
Yeah.
They would get to know us, and they would understand what our viewpoints are.
Yes.
Yep.
We don't have to, okay, I need to investigate you. We need to answer a few questions on your way in.
Yeah.
Okay, do you know what we believe about this? Then it doesn't matter at that point.
Yeah.
It does not matter.
They're in the door. That's already in the best place they can be.
They need to come into the family.
I call it fire hose ministry. It doesn't work. When you blast someone, just
and this is the thing too, because there are some people who come in, and, we do some things different than maybe they grew up with. We baptize a little different. We do communion a little different. There's some things that are odd about us. But but they don't notice them when they first come in, and we don't, there's no need to tell. It's just welcome to the family.
Yep.
And then when the first time I get up and baptize the baby and sprinkle the baby, I explain it.
Yep.
And I say this is why we do what we do, and and by that time they know us and we love them and they love us.
Yeah.
So they're going, yeah, that's kind of weird.
Yep.
But you know what? It's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's that whole thing. So I'm with you two guys. I know how God feels about sin, but I wrote this down, and I got to end with this. There's this thing that we used to say. I certainly don't say it anymore because it's not helpful. Love the sinner, hate the sin.
Yes. Yeah.
You can't just love the sinner.
There you go.
But here's
we need to hate our own sin.
Yeah.
That's what I wrote down.
Is it?
Love the sinner, hate our own sin.
There it is.
Invite fellow sinners to walk with us toward the only one who knew no sin.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's very well said.
There you go.
See,
Did
I
you
just
write
had-
that? Did you come up with that?
I think I borrowed it.
I think.
I
I've
don't
heard
know.
that first line before. Hate our own sin.
I'm probably not that brilliant, but,
But
anyway.
I need the rest of that. That's good.
Yeah. But anyway, my final word is, if you want to get any of these resources, it starts at Preston Sprinkle, Preston, Sprinkle, just like you would sprinkle.
Yeah.
He must be a Cumberland Presbyterian.
Sprinkling, man.
Exactly.
That's a good name. Good name.
Yeah, Jonathan sent me a picture of, it wasn't Dunkin' Donuts, it was Sprinkling Donuts for the Presbyterians.
CPs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Anyway, so Preston Sprinkle, and we're going to bring some of his material into probably do like a Wednesday night cycle or something like that.
Cool.
To kind of help orient ourselves with the way. Just kind of to have a greater understanding of what's going on around us.
Yeah.
You can
So
say
that
it
we
to,
can-
to re-educate some of the hating.
No. Well, honestly, why do we hate because we fear. We fear because we don't
know.
understand.
That's right.
Yes. That's what I'm saying.
And so if we begin to understand a little bit,
Yeah.
then it takes away some of the mystery of it.
Yep.
It takes away a little bit of the
Yep.
fear, and then we can at least know what people are talking about when they use these kinds of terms,
Yep.
and when they talk about these certain, a lot of people probably don't even know what the LGBTQIA plus means.
I can't keep up with
Hey,
it.
I'm
half the
telling
time,
you
yeah.
what, I get lost after a few letters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's why they put the plus on the end, because there's going to be more to come.
And then
Yeah.
some. Yeah.
Yeah. But these things are really real to a lot of real people.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
these real people have names, and they have faces, and they've been through a lot.
Yep.
And, we understand that we're all broken.
Yeah.
And so let's all be broken together. And
Yep.
so that's where we are. So let us know how we did.
Yeah. Comment below your thoughts.
Yeah.
Again, I feel like we handled this well. Comment below what you thought. Hit that like button. Hit subscribe. Rate us on Spotify. Hey, and you can, you probably can check them. You can write to us. And sometimes you stick little polls and stuff on Spotify.
I do. If you listen to us on Spotify, you'll see a little question you can answer and a poll down at the
Yeah.
bottom. So even if you like to watch us on YouTube or Facebook, every now and then just go to Spotify.
Yep, check the
and you
polls.
can speed listen if you want to, or you
Yeah.
can just go down there and play around with the polls and everything.
There you go.
And we'll get it done.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, guys. We appreciate it.
Appreciate y'all. Thank you.
Catch you next week.